The following program is an independent production, apart from DJDP Productions. The views, opinions, and ideas of the producers of The Darkest Hour do not necessarily reflect those of the staff of DJDP Productions, its partners or affiliates. The producers of The Darkest Hour with Amanda Jane of Forget Me Not assume all responsibility for the content of its program. Should you have questions or concerns regarding The Darkest Hour with Amanda Jane, please contact the producers directly. Or you may also contact the staff at Neo Retro FM through email at djdphoenix@protonmail.com. Be sure to include the date of the program and the subject matter you're inquiring about. And now, Neo Retro FM presents The Darkest Hour with Amanda Jane, streamed live from Marysville, Washington. For tomorrow, we embark on the darkest hour.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Have you ever had an unexplainable experience that you found yourself explaining away anyway? Sometimes that's good enough, right? You hear something, see something, but that's it. You look back and laugh to yourself because it's just the cat, or your reflection. How silly. And other times, you can't laugh. It's not the cat at all. And it's what you don't see in the mirror that terrifies you. How scary. I think you know which ones we'll be getting into tonight. So, let's get started, shall we? Though I no longer live there, I grew up in a weird house, as I often refer to it. My family was normal, but the house itself was very odd, and weird things happened a lot. The home is in Central Oregon, and my parents still own the place. They live there during the summer months and often head to California during the winter or colder months. Earlier this summer, my partner and I had been staying at the house. With my parents being a bit older, they decided to stay in California this year and hunker down in their home there, not traveling until they really needed to. My partner and I love the outdoors, and their house was a prime location for a lot of outdoor trails and parks. So this story is about something extra weird that happened in the house while visiting. The first night, my partner and I both simultaneously stood up out of bed at exactly 3 a.m., not saying a word and not making a sound. Just before standing up, we had both been sound asleep. Neither of us knew that the other had stood up. In fact, it wasn't until we both made our way to the bedroom door that we were surprised to see the other awake. Nothing woke us up, we both agreed, but we're still confused why we were awake. We stood there looking at each other, and my partner said, "This is weird." I agreed, and we took one last look out the bedroom door, and then we both went back to bed. I know it took a while for us to fall back asleep. It was eerie. The next morning, we were making breakfast, and we heard, "Hello, honey. Oh, we're so happy you're here." It was my mom's voice. It sounded like she was coming into the main room and towards us, but then she never appeared. It wasn't possible that they were here, my parents, that is, but we both stopped what we were doing and ran into the front room. No one was there, definitely not my mom. My partner looked at me again and said, "That was weird." We ended up literally taking a hike that day and wouldn't return until later that night. On our hike, I told my partner about my weird house. She laughed because it was exactly how she'd described the events so far, but wasn't entirely bothered by any of it. When we got home, I could see that the upstairs bedroom light was on. Since we were the only ones there, I asked my partner if she'd left it on. And since we couldn't really pinpoint yes or no, we didn't think much of it until we got in the house. We went upstairs to go turn the light off, but it wasn't on. Worried someone may be in the house, we checked every corner or closet that we could think of, but we found nothing. I wouldn't say we were scared, but we did decide to sleep on the pull-out couch downstairs that night, with the TV on and a few lights too, eventually falling asleep. But then, my partner and I both simultaneously stood up at exactly 3 a.m. This time we noticed right away that we'd done it at the same time. But we also noticed that it was now pitch black in the house. All the lights that we'd left on were off, and the TV was off. Again, we didn't know what had woken us up. Just as we were considering sliding back into bed, the TV, which was an older, boxier one, made a sound like it was turning off, but it had already been off. "Should we go upstairs?" I asked half reluctantly. Like, should we sleep up there? No answer, but I could see that she looked a bit worried now, looking down and saying, "Our blanket. It's all the way at the end of the bed. Do you think that's what woke us up? We had no covers on." "Possibly," I told her, and then offered some additional blankets. What if something pulled them off? Maybe we woke up to something pulling the covers off of us. We were tired, but she sounded worried. I suggested that we could head home early if we wanted. After standing for a moment, we decided to crawl back into the sleeper sofa and just try to get some sleep. We'd consider leaving tomorrow. I don't know how much sleep either of us got, but in the morning, we decided over coffee that we'd head home that afternoon, not feeling like staying another night in the house. Now, this last part, this is the type of thing I grew up with. We would often refer to it as a prankster ghost because things would go missing and reappear elsewhere. Reappearing in places that the one who lost it hadn't been. Like the time that I couldn't find my Walkman. I used it all the time, and it was the day I was leaving for camp. I ended up having to leave without it. When I got home, my mom said she found it in the basement, sealed up in a bag of old baby clothes that hadn't been opened in over a decade. She decided to go through things for donation, and there it was. Obviously, I wasn't anywhere near those clothes. So, we're trying to leave, but naturally, the one thing that my partner and I need are our keys. Nowhere to be found. A search ensues for far too long before I think and suggest maybe we look in unusual places. I say I know it sounds crazy, but it's happened before. At this point, nothing seems crazy. "I'll start upstairs, you look anywhere else since you know this place," she said. We separated and began to look for the keys. I started in the basement, where I can see that it's not nearly as packed as it once was. It doesn't take me long to decide that the keys are not down there, and I go upstairs to join my partner. As I make a pit stop at the kitchen, I hear my partner coming down the stairs. She enters the kitchen and says, "Where did you find them?" Confused, I follow her gaze. The keys are sitting on the counter, next to my right hand. "I didn't," I said. She tells me she was upstairs, searching through all the drawers, and heard me yell, "Found 'em! Let's go!" Which is when she came down the stairs and into the kitchen. We have no explanation for any of these occurrences. All I've ever been able to come up with is, this is a weird house. Aberdeen, Washington, is a town broken by years of misfortune. Its community's resilience, the lifeblood filtering through the streets day in and day out, has been a faint breath, just enough to claim a pulse of existence. Its rural location and history of economical hardships attract little opportunity for new business. Down each street, the shops that remain open are often surrounded by boarded-up buildings, shells of former dreams, decorated with graffiti and plywood, left by someone who, like many generations of residents, had a burning ambition to escape. But the struggles of small-town life had stomped out the flame years ago, like the countless cigarette butts that lined its chipped sidewalks. Aberdeen also holds its fair share of ghost stories, and after 3 decades of living here, I can safely say that I've heard them all. It's common knowledge that a bar in town called Mac's is haunted. So haunted, in fact, that the locals don't bat an eye when they see drinks move or doors slam. Personally, I'd never seen anything out of the ordinary on my visits, and I'm a regular at Mac's. Though I'm also a lot more skeptical than the average patron when odd occurrences take place. The most action I've seen at Mac's was a drink slide off a table. Everyone got real excited, but in my heart, I couldn't accept that it wasn't a slight bump someone gave the table, or the possibility of a large truck rolling by, vibrating the drink onto the floor. This being stated to emphasize that logic and reason are always on the forefront of my mind when viewing these situations. But I do have one experience yet to be rationalized. And though this is not an admittance to my belief in ghosts, I'm still in remittance for an answer that my mind can conceptualize. And the only feedback I've received from the people I've talked to have been an overwhelming consensus of, that's probably a ghost, without even bothering to investigate other theories. But here's my story. And maybe one of your listeners will have a more articulated idea rather than, that's probably a ghost. Back in January of this year, I had been shooting pool with my friends at Mac's and enjoying their biscuits and gravy, which are the best in Grays Harbor County. I had not been drinking that night as I'd been 3 months sober then, and I'm proud to say that I'm still going strong as I'm writing this to you. So, it was near 2 a.m. when I began my trip, hopped on my bike, and headed away from Mac's toward home. Aberdeen radiates a naturally disparaging essence, only magnified when the streetlights come on. But living here half my life, I had become used to this setting and had long lost the little ball of fear that would sit in my stomach while riding my bike in the dark, alone. And any subconscious fear I'd have is put at ease knowing that I carry a small taser on me, capable of incapacitating any junkie that might try to rob me. I've only used it once, but its power greatly exceeded my expectations when it completely dropped my would-be assailant to the curb. But I digress. It's now a bit past 2 a.m. and I'm riding down West Heron Street. And like every night, the sidewalks were empty and quiet. And at the corner of West Heron Street, there's a brick motel. I'm leaving out the name as to not deter potential customers. The motel makes up a whole city block, a small city block, and if viewed from a bird's eye, would resemble a block letter C, with the empty center being the parking lot that faces the street. Riding past the parking lot, I can see there's only a few cars, scattered amongst the spots spread away from one another. Continuing my brief scan of the motel, I see a more unusual sight, a woman standing in the middle of the empty parking lot. As I pedal closer, almost passing the motel now, I noticed she wasn't approaching any of the cars. She remained completely still. Glancing back again, I can see that she's not moving at all, standing in the center of a poorly lit parking lot, staring at something, and not moving. Seeing this made me slow my bike to a stop, curious as to what she was doing. My next thought was that she was probably scoping out a car to break into. She definitely didn't look like she was trying to stay at the motel, nor did it look like she was leaving, not packing or unpacking a car. Matter of fact, she wasn't even standing close to the cars that could have been hers. And her gaze was somewhere else. She was looking up and across the street. I'm not over-exaggerating with how unsettling it was to see this woman standing stiff as a board in the middle of the parking lot. Enough for me to stop my bike to at least inquire if she's okay. My question raises more red flags as it's met with no response. I stay on my bike, but once more I try to get her attention, this time with a sarcastically drawn out, "Hello?" To no avail, her head fixed forward, long black hair obscuring most of her facial features. But I'm certain in the direction that she's looking, and I'm certain my exclamations had no effect as her stillness persisted, without a hint of acknowledgement. I follow her stare as if to gain the enlightenment she's withholding from me. Directly across the street is a used automobile shop. Looking at the couple rows of cars, nothing jumps out as an immediate area of interest. I turn to recalibrate my view with the woman's view, but I discover that she's no longer in the parking lot. She's nowhere to be found. For the first time in my adult life, I truly got the heebie-jeebies. That feeling I'd get when I was a child and I'd flick off the light, sprint up the basement stairs before the boogeyman could grab my legs. My whole body felt like electric jello. I grabbed my handlebars and I pedaled to the gas station, kitty corner to the motel. I stormed in and tried to explain myself, but it was only after my steadfast claim of sobriety that the gas station worker actually agreed to review the security footage. But when we looked through the last hour of footage, it really didn't help my case. From across the street, the camera captured me rolling up on my bike, but no one's in the parking lot with me. It's clear that I'm talking to someone, and we watch all the tapes all the way up to me getting on my bike and speeding away to the gas station. My hope for evidence only incriminating my stability more, I feel isolated in my perplexity. I hope reaching out with my story will bring back a wider array of theories for me to lean on, besides the already widely popular one I've been offered, which is, that's probably a ghost. For context, I live with my girlfriend in a house that her dad owns, and living with us is her best friend and her best friend's boyfriend. Lately, some very strange things have been happening around the house. And by lately, I mean the last 4 months, at least once a week, every week. And for the last week, it seems almost daily. It started out small things like seeing shadows, each of us seeing them and assuming that they were from someone else, until we each experienced them when alone and had no rational explanation as to where it could have come from. Then, you'd hear the floors creaking and footsteps. The sounds were the same sounds you hear when someone like myself or anyone else was actually walking in the house. It's hard to explain this away to being just an old house because lately things have escalated, leading me at least to believe that these little things are all related somehow, connected, if you will. At this point, each of us has had experiences of hearing one of us, any of the other house members, talking, when in fact that person who was supposedly talking said nothing. The best example I can give is we're constantly finding ourselves saying to one another, "That sounded just like you," if we're in the same room, or finding ourselves asking, "What did you say?" and getting a response from someone saying, "I didn't say anything." So it's never entirely clear what that person is saying, just for sure that it's their voice. This happens constantly. What I meant by escalated was that 2 nights ago, my girlfriend and I left to grab some food, and when we got home, we heard her best friend's boyfriend in their bedroom, loudly talking and laughing, on and off for about an hour. He plays video games, so we assumed that he was playing online. But at one point, while we were finishing eating, I thought he asked one of us to come here. So I said, "What's up?" But I heard nothing back. So I assumed he had his headphones on and forgot about it, and kept watching TV. Less than 20 minutes later, we hear my girlfriend's best friend pull into the driveway, and at the same time we realize that the loud talking has stopped. In the front door walks my girlfriend's best friend and her boyfriend, who had been at work all day. I believe something is in this house with us. I'm not sure why it would want to mimic us, like, what's the purpose of all that? But my girlfriend swears nothing bad has happened in the house, that they actually lived here for several years and their family didn't experience anything strange, so I'm just at a loss. We aren't scheduled to move anytime soon, so I'll write as more happens. But I think some answers at this point would be really nice. Even as I write this now, I can hear what sounds like my girlfriend in the kitchen talking. And it could be her. She's not currently in our room. But it's gotten to the point where, unless we ask, how will we ever really know? My brother had a stay-in night nurse, and I would always wake up and watch cartoons with her around 3 a.m. One night, when I was about 7 years old, I woke up to see 2 different ladies, but there was only supposed to be one. My brother was a sick kid growing up and needed around-the-clock medical monitoring. So as a result, we had a staff of lovely nurses who would come stay the night and make sure that he made it through the night okay. There was only ever one nurse per shift, and they would often stay up reading or watching cartoons. Being 7 years old, I especially loved cartoons, and these nurses were like family to us, and I adored them. So I'd wake up most of the time, 3, 4 a.m., and go into the living room for some secret snacks, a snuggle, and some Looney Tunes. Anyways, one morning I woke up to see a nurse that I didn't recognize, sitting on the couch. I thought that was unusual because it was always the same 3 ladies, rotating through the shifts. But I was willing to make a new friend. I walked out in my blanket and introduced myself. This new lady then said, "Nice to meet you, Billy. We're here to watch your brother, to make sure he stays with us." I thought this was sort of an odd statement, and I also noted how her clothes looked like clothes that my mom had worn in photos from when she was younger, in high school. To give you a picture, this would be early 80s clothing. But nonetheless, I sat on the couch, and after a few seconds, one of my brother's usual nurses came out of the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart? I heard you get up," she said as she raised the cups of tea. The woman beside me was gone, and I was left confused. I told the regular nurse the entire story of the morning, and she said that I must have been sleepwalking or remembering a dream. But it's still a very real memory for me. So much so that I could smell her perfume as I sat on the couch beside her. I remember it well because the nurses didn't usually wear perfume. I liked it. I felt like I'd smelled it before, but I knew it was not my mom's perfume. I also want to add that during the time my brother was sick, my family had many, many experiences. They all brought us to the belief that my brother was being taken care of, not only by nurses in this realm, but possibly from other ones as well. I regularly thank the universe for the person my brother's become. He was supposed to be nonverbal and potentially bedridden his whole life. Yet here he is, very much verbal and mobile. 27 years later, he's grown into a talented, hard-working high school counselor, basketball coach, and volunteer firefighter. So proud to call him my brother and my best friend. I can't say enough good things about him. But also, I can't say enough good things about these angels, as my mom likes to refer to them. To all the nurses out there, really, you are the true heroes in this world. And maybe others, too. I have a few different experiences, but I'll tell you the one that I tell the most. It's probably one of my more frightening stories, and luckily I didn't have to experience it alone. My sister has been able to validate the story as I've shared it in life. I was about 14, so my sister Jenny would have been about 12. It was July, and we were out of school for summer break, looking for something to do. It was mid-afternoon, so there was nothing spooky going on at the time. We were just sitting upstairs in my room on my bed. I grabbed a box of cassettes from under my bed and joked that we should listen to some of the old stories on a tape player. Since we were bored and we knew we wouldn't be going anywhere until at least one of our parents got home, we decided what the heck, and my sister ran and grabbed the tape player from the computer room. The story we decided on was a classic, Disney's The Rescuers. Originally, it had come with a book to read along with, but we'd lost that years ago. So we were listening to the story for all of 2 minutes when my sister got antsy and started talking. We'd missed some of the story, which wasn't a big deal since we knew the story, but she jokingly zipped her lips and hit the rewind on the tape player. When she hit play, that's when we heard a voice. Not the melodic voice that had narrated this story for us our whole lives, but a deep voice, a man's voice. Just the voice itself invoked fear within me. It was like anxiety and terror and all bad things somehow personified into this voice. We froze to listen, and while we did, every awful thought or horrible feeling I've ever had rushed through my body. The words are still frightening to recall.
You are mine. You are my children. Your souls are mine. You are mine.
I reached over and shut off the tape player. I looked at my sister, who was sitting, stunned and quiet. And and after a long while, I said, "It's a very old tape player. It's very old and it just malfunctioned." Jenny nodded slowly. She was willing to accept my analysis of what had happened. We didn't talk about it again for a while, and we never listened to the tapes or used the recorder again. When we finally did talk about it, we asked our parents whatever happened to all those old tapes and the tape player. Turns out they donated them to the local library. This was when we still lived in Kennewick, Washington, and we're now in Utah. But we looked it up and there aren't any copies at that local library, according to the website. So I guess I'm curious if anyone out there is holding on to a copy of Disney's The Rescuers on tape, and if so, have you heard anything strange?
Your Honor, my defendant here is innocent, and I can prove it. How could he have committed the crime when he's not even a person? He's a commercial break. He's been a commercial break all along.
Objection!
Order,
Hey,
order,
no,
order!
Wait a second. No.
Neo Retro FM, live from Olympia, Washington. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Modern music programming. NeoRetroFM.com. Hi everyone, Amanda Jane here. Taking a moment to talk to you about something my husband Ryan and our band, Forget Me Not, are doing this summer. We're partnering with Foundation ESD and their Nourishing Network program to help families in need all summer. You can help support too. It just takes streaming our music all summer long as we continue to donate 100% proceeds to the foundation. Visit conductedbyforgetmenot.com for more information and join us in making No Student Hungry a reality. To learn more about the Foundation ESD and their various programs, please visit foundationesd.org or conductedbyforgetmenot.com.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Man turns out to be a commercial break in disguise. Extra, extra, read all about it. Newsy Boy brings back the stories.
Hey, I'll take one.
That'll be 5 cents.
Oh, I don't have that.
I currently live in Western New York, a town which is about an hour away from Lake Ontario. My complex has a laundromat. It's in a small building behind the complex, surrounded on every side by patches of forest, and the forest next to a river. I have a habit of doing laundry at night since I typically work days, and I don't like to fight the weekend crowd. We all have key cards for the building, but since it's not technically open past 7, the laundromat lights are usually shut off. To remedy this issue, I bring a battery-powered lantern that I bought at the dollar store, and it works just fine to light up the space that I need. Since the laundromat isn't attached to the actual apartments themselves, no one seems to notice I'm in there or have any care, since I've never heard from the property manager. One night, 2 years ago, late December, I'm doing laundry as I normally do. This night may be a little bit later than usual, since around the holidays I'm consistently working double shifts. So it's around midnight, and I've got my whole setup. Phone for music and to watch stuff, my camping lantern for light, and a bag of Cheetos for good measure. I decide that I'll need to wash my hands of the inevitable orange stains that I've acquired before switching my laundry, so I head over to the sink. Now, the sink is in the bathroom, which is on the back wall. I walk in and start to wash my hands. There's a mirror directly above the sink, and from this position, with the bathroom door open, I have a perfect view of the front entrance, which is made up of large windows. Casually glancing at my own reflection, I'm immediately drawn to something walking outside, in front of the building. I turn and continue to stare at what looks like bed sheets, or someone wrapped in bed sheets. Once I get a bit closer to the windows, I'm certain I've never seen anything like this before. The legs were as though someone was on stilts, but it wasn't nearly tall enough for someone who could actually walk, whom also was on stilts. And the head? It's like there wasn't one. Maybe just a ball of white, like when you make those ghosts out of cotton balls and tissues and a rubber band. But then also had stick legs. I can see it's making its way to the forest, maybe back to the forest. And it dawns on me to grab my phone. So I run back, and as I grab it, I realize my hands are still soaking wet, and it slips at first. I catch it, trying to dry my fingers off so I can open the damn thing. But by the time I did, the thing had almost fully disappeared into the woods. I instantly wished I wasn't alone. Then maybe I'd have the courage to follow it, I thought. But I didn't follow it. And ever since that moment, I've wondered what would happen if I did. Was it harmless? I have no idea, but I never got the chance to see it again. I still do laundry at night, and sometimes even around midnight, just to see if I can get another glimpse at whatever it was I saw that night. Getting older has been interesting, but even as I sit here, less than 10 years from retirement, I can say without a doubt the most interesting thing I've experienced was in my 20s. Currently, I manage my own cleaning service where I don't actually do much of the cleaning anymore, but this story is back when I had just started cleaning houses. At the time, I worked for several different families in one cul-de-sac, usually cleaning them all on the same days. The homes were all very nice, very large, and ironically, already very clean. There was one house, though, that, unlike all the others, I only actually saw who lived there once, which was the day that she hired me. The woman was strange. She had approached me while I was leaving one of her neighbors' homes and asked me about my services. That wasn't the strange part. When I'd finished explaining when I was available and the services I could provide, I noticed that she was staring just behind me now. It was quiet out and I had just been looking in that direction, but I turned around to see what she was staring at. As I thought, nothing was there. "Miss?" I said as I looked back at her. She was still staring. "Okay, well, ma'am, it was nice to meet you. I better get going, but here's my card." She didn't reach out her hands or anything to grab it, so I awkwardly put it back in my pocket and walked to my car saying, "Okay, remember I'm here every Monday." Just as I got into my car, she started to come back to life, running to my driver's side door and asking me to wait, saying sorry and that sometimes she just goes away for a little. I wasn't sure how to react, so I just smiled and said that's totally fine. Repeated my name, and when she asked for my card, I repeated the information quickly while she appeared to be present. She stopped me, asking if I could just start today, right now. I hesitated for just a moment, and before I could say yes or no, she offered to pay me double for the work I would do that day. She looked desperate, almost as desperate as I was for double pay. So, as I entered her home, I noticed it was very dark. Clean, but dark. Walking through, I saw that the furniture was beautiful and very fancy, but all had coverings on them, from the couch to the kitchen table. It was odd, but perhaps she was moving, or maybe this was a second home of some kind. We ended up in the kitchen where she pulled out 2 chairs and asked me to sit down, if I wanted anything. I sat down and told her I was fine with water. Sitting there, I couldn't help but notice that some of the things she had hanging on her walls were covered with newspaper. "Are you preparing to move, or have you just moved in?" I asked, not sure if it was rude, but genuinely curious about what I was seeing, and also what I would be doing. The house was literally spotless, so clean that it still smelled like cleaning supplies, and they weren't mine. "Oh, no, this was my parents' house. That's all she said. I didn't feel like it was appropriate to ask further. If they had passed, she may have offered that information if she wanted to. She sat down, handing me a glass of water and then staring at me, smiling. Yes, they're home, she continued. And now I'm supposed to take care of it or something, but it's far too large for my liking. Rather lonely house, you see. I smiled, acknowledging that large spaces, alone, can indeed be lonely. Well, where would you like me to start? You mentioned dusting. Did you have a preference? Did you want me to dust the furniture, the things that are covering them? A noise from upstairs distracted me. Is someone else here? I asked. She slowly turns her head towards the stairs, looking in that direction for far too long. No, nobody else here. Large house, lots of stuff, she said as she got up from the table. She said that we would go look at the other rooms on the floor. She could show me what she needed. We finished walking through the rooms on the lower level, and as we made our way out towards the kitchen, the woman didn't walk up the stairs. She passed them. So just the lower level? I asked. She nodded and said, Yes, dear, no need to go upstairs today. Come sit. I followed her back to the table, but before sitting down, I asked to use the restroom. Yes, the door on the right, next to the study, down the hall. I made my way to the bathroom, and once I turned on the light for the first time, I was a bit taken aback. I noticed the mirror was completely covered, in newspaper as well. To prevent dust, I'm sure, is what I thought. I made my way back to the table and casually asked if that was the case. She took a deep breath and said, Okay, I'll be honest. I just needed some company today. See, I don't stay here often, but with my living room being renovated, I decided to stay a week or so. She sipped her tea and continued to tell me that the house gave her the creeps. She's actually covered all of the mirrors because she heard it can keep out evil spirits. I started to get the feeling that maybe this woman struggled mentally, and my initial thought of her being a bit strange was maybe more related to her mental state. I'm no doctor, and I wasn't going to walk away from a perfectly good job just because somebody is a little bit different than myself. So I told her that I heard that too about the mirrors, and then asked her what she wanted me to take care of today. And that's when I learned that she was truly offering to pay me double my rate just to hang out with her, essentially. It consisted of me listening to a lot of stories about her life and not a whole lot to do with the type of work I'd be doing. I didn't feel like it warranted double pay, though. It wouldn't matter. Next time I'd go there, she would have left double pay on the corner's edge of the counter, just like she said she would. And honestly, by the end, I think I may have earned it. I started my work at her home around 6 p.m. just after finishing the other homes. She wasn't going to be at the house any longer, so I saved hers for last, meaning it wouldn't matter if the kitchen was cleaned in time for dinner at this house since no one would be cooking it. So I let myself in the house. She didn't lock the doors. I found this very odd, but her comment to me was that no one was going to try to rob this house. Trust me. In the same sentence, she told me not to try to move anything around either. Just leave everything as it is. I decided to open the shutters and turn on some lights, grab the money from the counter and put it into my bag. And then I read her note. Thank you, thank you, thank you, written 3 times. And then, please don't move anything. Be careful, M. I'll admit the be careful threw me for a loop, but I recalled that this woman put newspapers and sheets all over her mirrors and also went places sometimes, leaving her motionless and speechless, so I moved on. I started to dust and disinfect all the plastic coverings in each room per her instructions, washed all the linens as she had specified, and as I looked at one of the mirrors at the end of the hall, I decided I might as well wash that sheet as well. I could cover it with a new sheet before I left, or just wait for this one to dry. But the sheet needed to be washed. I didn't even think twice as I did this, not really even looking in the mirror at the time. I went to throw everything in the washer, and as I did, I heard a loud crash. Shit. I thought to myself, sure that I had just broken that giant mirror behind me down the hall. I slowly made my way back to the hall with linens in arms. But nothing was broken. Nothing was on the ground. One thing I knew was that I heard the crash. I was concerned now that it came from somewhere else, so I hit the laundry room, started the load, and began investigating the sound. After searching the entire floor, every room and closet, I could see nothing. I was more determined than afraid at this time, so I started to make my way upstairs. Maybe it came from up there. I didn't need to clean up there, just the stairs themselves, but if something fell or got destroyed, I wanted the woman to hear it from me, not discover it on her own. I scooted up the stairs, and just as I hit the top step, something pushed me. I don't mean slipped. I mean something physically stopped my scoot to the top step and pressed into my shoulders. Suddenly, I was falling backwards. I tried to contort my body in a way that would allow me to grab the rail on the right. And just in time not to smash my face and head against the stairs, I grab it, my knees and shins hitting them instead, my whole body's force against the railing. I was just kneeling there, breathing heavy, trying not to panic. I knew that I didn't see anyone there, but I also felt the force of something hit me backwards. In pain but alive, I pulled myself up and decided to retreat downstairs. At least this way, if something did break up there, I could say in all honesty I never went up there. I didn't care about the sound anymore. My legs hurt. I made my way to the bathroom to sit for a minute, clean up the skinned knees, and breathe. After leaving the bathroom, I made my way to the kitchen. I went to grab some ice, but the fridge and freezer was empty, no longer plugged in. I guess that makes sense, I thought. I sat back down thinking about my fall on the stairs, feeling a bit uneasy for the first time. Once the laundry was done, I was done. I folded everything and left right away, not locking the doors again per the owner's instructions. I came back the following week and had almost forgotten about the events that had happened the week before. At least forgotten that it made me feel eerie versus how I felt now, which was silly for almost falling down the stairs and killing myself. When I walked in the house, I got a chill instantly. That's weird, I thought. Weird because it was rather warm out. Being July in Central California and a house where the AC's not running, I didn't expect a chill. Great, my shift hasn't even started, and I was already wanting to leave, I thought. Something was different about the house. I walked slowly to try to figure out what it was, and as I entered the hallway, it became very obvious. All the coverings had been removed from the walls. But stranger, it was like they had hung more mirrors instead of the latter. I tried to ignore this, but I felt conflicted about which was stranger. The initial coverings of the mirrors, or the removal of coverings and addition of mirrors. When I got to the kitchen, I saw nothing on the corner's edge of the counter. I used her phone to check my messages one last time, just to be sure that she had said to be there that day, that time. She had. Either way, though, she wasn't here, and it didn't appear my services were needed. I called the number I had for the woman, and it just kept ringing. No chance to leave a message, so I hung up. Before heading out and starting my drive home, I decided to use the restroom. At first, the mirror not being covered surprised me. My own reflection scared me, so I couldn't help but laugh. Just as I went to flush the toilet, I heard something move above me, like someone moving furniture. I froze in place, waiting for the toilet to stop making noise. And when it did, I couldn't hear anything. I told myself to snap out of it and go home. As I left the bathroom and started toward the kitchen to grab my stuff, I felt a slight pull on my hair. I swung myself around and now facing the mirror at the end of the hall. I was staring into it, just staring at myself. And as I did, suddenly felt someone grab my hair. I could see my hair move in the mirror, but no one else was there. I turned around and jolted to the kitchen. Halfway there, I hear that very same crash I heard the week before. I kept going to get my stuff, grabbed all of it, and as I passed the hallway to leave, I could see that this time the mirror had fallen. It was shattered, I was sure of it, but I wasn't sticking around to investigate or anything like that. Almost to the front door when I hear more crashing. I open the door, wheel my stuff out, and as I desperately try to grab my goods and close the door, I see that the floor is littered with broken glass from many fallen mirrors and frames. I actually stood up and looked around a moment. Maybe this was an earthquake, but nothing else was moving. Only the things inside this house seemed to be unstable. I couldn't watch the crashing anymore. I closed the door, and as inappropriate as it may have been, I went to the house of another family, asking if they'd experienced any kind of earthquake, and if I could use their phone to contact their neighbor. At the time, all I had was a pager. People could leave you messages, but you needed a phone to check them. The family was nice about it and also said no to the comment about earthquakes. I called the woman, but still no answer, and I couldn't leave a message. Instead, I left a note, placed it on her door, but I never talked to her again. I continued to clean houses in the cul-de-sac, but that house maintained its vacancy the entire time I did, which was about 2 years. I saw it hit the market once, and that was very short-lived, being taken off just a few weeks later. I'm pretty skeptical of these kinds of things, if you will, even having experienced it myself. But I can say, without a doubt, there was something wicked in that house. And I understood why she didn't worry about the unlocked doors. I mean, I couldn't even make it past the last step, and I wasn't even trying to rob the place. I think about this experience often, wondering if I did in fact stray from her initial request to not move anything. Is it possible that my removing the sheet from the mirrors helped unlock something? Open the house up to negativity? Or was the house itself just evil? So this might be hard to imagine, but I attached an article that has a picture of what I'm referring to. The photo in the article is almost identical to the one that my friend took, also attached. But you can find them both online by Googling Burbank, California, floating figure in the sky. This was last year before summer had started, and it happened during the day. We were sitting on my friend's back deck. It was myself, my friend Greta, and her older brother Sam. I was talking to Sam about colleges because it was about that time for us to start thinking about it, while Greta appeared to be admiring how nice the clouds in the sky were. But just a few moments later, Greta stopped our conversation and said, "Guys, look," and pointed up above the houses in front of us. Both Sam and I switched our gaze. We could see what Greta was talking about. Floating above us was a black silhouette of what looked like a human. It was like it was walking in the sky. We each took turns saying out loud, "What the?" as the figure continued to waltz in the skyline, as though it was gliding on a flat surface, but in the sky. Greta took her phone out and snapped as many pictures as she could, until finally Sam said, "Turn on your video." And with her fingers of speed, she did just that. She managed to record it until it completely disappeared, no more than 10 seconds later. Since then, probably almost a year after it happened, a lot of people started to talk about these videos, and I've seen online people chalking it up to being balloons. But just trust me, as someone who was actually sitting there and whose eyes truly could see more than my friend's smartphone could capture, this was no balloon or balloons. They were completely black, as dark as a shadow. And as much as it was in this dimension, it didn't look to be three-dimensional. Furthermore, there was a group of neighbors in the town not far from us who followed this thing as far as they could and said the exact same thing that we did. It disappeared. But just before, it had been floating in place. I have seen many things in the sky living in California, including my fair share of balloons. We just had a graduation a couple of months ago, and the sky was littered with them. Not a single group of balloons or single balloon took on the shape of a human. No, they all looked just like balloons. So, what did we really see? And has anyone else ever seen this figure walking in the sky? My first job in the medical field was at a nursing home. You had a story on here that reminded me of my experience. It actually made me question my experience a bit more. It's pretty common for people fresh out of medical school to look for a job in a nursing home. The turnaround is really high, and you don't need a lot of experience. You'll also gain a lot of the information that you'll need if you want to work in a hospital or a doctor's office. This was about 15 years ago, and for the first few weeks of my shift at this new facility, nothing strange happened. I worked the night shift and learned that it wasn't uncommon to be given around 30 residents to care for. It's highly illegal, but it did happen. Sometimes I wonder if I was so busy I couldn't notice the strange things happening, but who knows. There was an old couple who lived in a room together. They were the only couple in the place, and the wife was declining rapidly, which brings us to my first encounter. We knew she was probably not going to make it through the night, but hoped that she could pull through to the day shift. This is because when a resident dies, there's a lot of paperwork involved, and we have to prepare the body, etc., and it honestly distracts us from comforting or taking care of the residents. The woman's husband was hitting the call button every few minutes, claiming that they, the people, were strangling his wife. He was frantic. There was no one else on the floor at the time aside from sleeping residents. We tried to comfort him, but this continued until about 3 a.m. He eventually stopped calling us into the room, but we could hear him screaming at the people to leave his wife alone, to get off of her. Attempts to console him eventually did not work. The man's wife died shortly after 3 a.m. For the rest of the time that I worked there, about a year, this man would talk to the people. He would call out for the people to come to his room, and then he would have conversations. This did not happen before his wife died. He was totally normal prior to that, so I've never really been sure what to make of all of this. And now, I'm wondering about that room. Maybe it was something in that room, and he was telling the truth after all. But who are the people? And so, we've reached the end. The end of the show, that is. Thank you for listening, and thank you for sharing. This concludes our lucky number 13th episode. Be sure to tune in every Friday night at 11 p.m., only on neoretrofm.com. Also, Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on Reddit, Amanda Jane FMN. Stay spooky.